In 2014, Amazon paid $970 million in cash for Twitch. No debt, no stock swap, cash. And Wall Street didn't laugh, they applauded. Analysts were throwing around an $8 billion valuation like it was conservative. By 2024, Amazon had laid off 35% of Twitch's workforce. Top creators were signing 9-figure deals to leave. Hours watched had declined 3 years straight. The $8 billion empire had become a cost center nobody wanted to talk about. So, how did the most dominant live streaming platform ever built collapse from the inside? Let's walk through it. Because this story isn't about gaming, it's about power. And what happens when you forget that power was borrowed, not owned? Twitch didn't start with a business plan. It started with a camera strapped to a man's head. In 2007, Justin Kan, a Yale graduate with a background in software, launched Justin.tv. The concept was radical and slightly insane. He wore a camera on his head, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, broadcasting his life to the internet in real time. Where he went, what he ate, who he talked to, all of it streamed live to whoever wanted to watch. Almost nobody wanted to watch Justin Kan live his life. But Justin.tv wasn't just Justin anymore. The platform had expanded to let anyone broadcast themselves. And buried inside the platform, something unexpected was happening. People were streaming themselves playing video games, and the audiences were enormous. Not mainstream enormous. But for 2008, 2009, 2010, the numbers were startling. Tens of thousands of concurrent viewers watching someone play StarCraft, watching someone run through a speedrun of Super Mario 64, watching someone fail at Dark Souls over and over and over again. The psychology of it confused outsiders. Why would you watch someone else play a game when you could just play it yourself? The answer, it turned out, was the same reason people watch sports, entertainment, community, the parasocial relationship between a performer and an audience. The streamer wasn't just playing. They were talking, reacting, reading comments, building an inside language with their viewers. It was television, but alive, responsive, and the audience wasn't passive. They were participants. In 2011, Justin.tv CEO Emmett Shear and the team recognized what they had. They spun the gaming section off into its own product. They called it Twitch, derived from the phrase Twitch gameplay, describing games that require fast reflex reactions. By 2012, Twitch had 20 million unique monthly visitors. By mid-2014, it was averaging 15 billion minutes of content watched per month. It had become the fourth largest source of internet traffic in the United States during peak hours, behind only Netflix, Google, and Apple. A website for watching people play video games was generating more traffic than YouTube gaming. More than Hulu, more than almost anything. Amazon noticed. August 25th, 2014. Amazon announces it is acquiring Twitch Interactive for $970 million in cash. The deal closes in September. At the time, it was the largest acquisition in Amazon's history. The strategic logic was clear, even if the execution would prove disastrous. Amazon Prime Video was struggling to compete with Netflix. Amazon needed a young audience. It needed engagement that extended beyond 2-hour movie windows. Twitch offered something Prime Video couldn't manufacture: daily habit. Viewers didn't drop in on Twitch, they lived there. And the advertising opportunity was enormous. The average Twitch viewer in 2014 was a 21-year-old male with disposable income and deep brand resistance to traditional advertising. Television couldn't reach him. Banner ads couldn't reach him. But his favorite streamer could. The influencer economy hadn't been named yet, but Twitch was running it at scale years before anyone had the vocabulary for it. Jeff Bezos understood distribution. He understood infrastructure. And what he didn't understand, what Amazon as an institution would never fully understand, was culture. Twitch wasn't a product. It was a scene, like a music scene or a film movement. It had its own language, its own celebrities, its own hierarchies, its own values, and those things couldn't be acquired. They could only be inherited, carefully, respectfully, or destroyed. Amazon chose to believe they had acquired both the scene and the product. They were wrong about one of them. For the first few years after the acquisition, Twitch largely operated as it always had. The founders stayed, the culture stayed. Amazon's fingerprints were light. They provided infrastructure. They provided resources. They mostly stayed out of the way. And during this period, Twitch grew into something genuinely staggering. By 2016, it had 100 million unique monthly visitors. By 2018, it was hosting over 27,000 partner channels, creators who had met Twitch's viewership and activity requirements and were earning revenue through subscriptions, ad revenue, and bits. Twitch's virtual currency that viewers could purchase and donate during streams. By 2019, it accounted for over 72% of all live streaming hours watched in the United States. 72%. Not competitive, dominant. The creators who built their careers on the platform during this period became some of the most recognizable names in entertainment, not just in gaming. Ninja, with 17 million followers, was playing Fortnite with Drake and getting covered by Rolling Stone. Pokimane was filling arenas, and Dr. Disrespect, before his complicated departure, was producing some of the most cinematically ambitious live content ever made. Shroud was demonstrating mechanical skill at such an inhuman level that non-gamers watched just to see something they couldn't fully comprehend. These weren't niche internet personalities anymore. These were stars, and the platform that created them was charging them 50% of everything they earned. Let's talk about the revenue split, because this is where everything starts. When a viewer subscribes to a Twitch channel, they pay $4.99 per month for the base tier. Twitch takes 50% of that. The streamer keeps 50%. That's $2.50 for months and months of daily content, of building a community, of being the reason that viewer is on the platform at all. Now, then Twitch quietly offered better deals to their biggest creators. For the top tier, the ones with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, the ones whose names drove platform-level traffic, Twitch would privately negotiate a 70-30 split. 70% to the creator, 30% to Twitch. These deals were never announced, never publicized, never available through any standard application process. You had to be famous enough that Twitch needed you more than you needed them, and then they'd call you for everyone else. It was 50-50, forever, with no path to better terms clearly defined. Compare this to YouTube, which pays creators 55% of ad revenue on standard videos and up to 70% on YouTube Premium revenue. Or to Kick, which we'll get to shortly, which was about to offer 95%. Or to literally any other creative economy, where the platform takes less than the person who made the thing. Twitch justified the 50% take rate by pointing to the infrastructure costs of live streaming. And those costs are real. Live streaming is bandwidth intensive in a way recorded video is not. You cannot cache a live stream the way you can cache a YouTube video. Every viewer requires a real-time connection. At 6 million concurrent viewers, the engineering cost is genuinely enormous. But here's what the infrastructure argument misses. The streamer is not just providing content. The streamer is providing the reason the viewer has a Twitch account at all. The streamer is the brand. The streamer is the product. The platform is the distribution mechanism. And in 2022, see how Twitch tried to make that relationship even more extractive, and the creators finally said no. In June 2022, Twitch announced a change to its partner program revenue splits. The plan was to end the private 70-30 deals for all but the absolute top tier of creators. Every partner above $100,000 in annual subscription revenue would see their split revert to 50-50 after hitting that threshold. Below it, some pathways to better splits would open up. But above it, the people actually making real money would be paying more. They called it a path toward a more equitable structure. The creators called it a betrayal. Hashtag Twitch Do Better trended globally within hours. A coordinated boycott was organized. Top streamers went dark. Mid-tier creators who had built their entire financial lives around Twitch subscription revenue did the math publicly, and the numbers were ugly. For a streamer generating $200,000 per year in subscriptions on a 70-30 deal, the change meant losing roughly $40,000 annually. Not a rounding error. A lifestyle Twitch reversed the policy within 3 weeks. CEO Dan Clancy issued a statement acknowledging the community response. The 70-30 deals would remain. The plan was scrapped. It looked like a win for creators, but wins that require public boycotts to achieve are not really wins. They're warnings, and Twitch did not read the warning correctly. While the subscription fight was happening, a quieter catastrophe was unfolding in the background. The DMCA crisis. DMCA stands for the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's the American law that lets copyright holders, music labels, film studios, anyone with intellectual property, demand the removal of content that uses their material without license. For years, Twitch had operated in an informal gray zone with music. Streamers played copyrighted music during their streams. The music industry largely looked the other way because the exposure was good marketing. Then, in 2020, the music labels decided to start enforcing. They sent mass automated DMCA notices to Twitch targeting archived VODs, the recorded replays of past streams that creators stored on the platform. Twitch's response was not to negotiate licensing deals on behalf of its creators. It was not to fight the notices legally. It was not to give creators advance warnings so they could review and delete their own content. Now, Twitch mass deleted thousands of hours of VOD content in a single wave, overnight, without individual notification, without appeals processes, without any acknowledgement that these were not just files on a server. They were years of someone's professional output. Streamers woke up to find that content they had created, content that had built their audiences, content they had planned to use to clip highlights and grow on other platforms, gone permanently, not archived, deleted. Twitch had sided with the music industry over its own creators, not because they had to. There were other legal strategies available, but because it was cheaper and faster and easier, and the cost was paid entirely by the people who built the platform. Now enter the man who would light the fuse. December 9th, 2019. Tyler Blevins, known online as Ninja, the most recognizable gaming personality on Earth at the time, announced he was leaving Twitch exclusively for Mixer, Microsoft's live streaming platform. The deal was reportedly worth between $20 million and $30 million. For context, Ninja had 14 million followers on Twitch at the time of his departure. He had been the single largest driver of platform traffic during the Fortnite boom of 2018. He had introduced millions of people to Twitch who had never visited a streaming site before. And he left. For money, yes, but also because he could. Michael Grzesiek, known as Shroud, one of the most watched first-person shooter players in streaming history, followed Ninja to Mixer weeks later. Another 9-figure deal, another seismic departure. Mixer collapsed in July 2020. Microsoft shut it down, unable to compete. Ninja and Shroud returned to Twitch, and superficially, Twitch had survived. The defectors came back. The platform was still standing, but something had fundamentally changed in the psychology of the creator economy. The idea that you stayed on Twitch because there was nowhere else to go. That belief had been shattered. Streamers were free agents. Their audiences were portable. Loyalty was a business calculation, not an identity. And if the right offer came along from the right platform with the right terms, the creators would leave again, and they might not come back. The right offer came in late 2022. It was called Kick. Kick was founded with backing from Stake.com, an online gambling platform, which immediately generated controversy and raised legitimate questions about the ethics of its funding model. We'll acknowledge that and move on. Because whatever the source of its capital, Kick's creator deal was structurally devastating to Twitch. Kick offered a 95/5 revenue split. 95% to the creator, 5% to the platform. Let's do the math side by side. A creator generating $10,000 per month in subscription revenue on Twitch keeps $5,000. On Kick, they keep $9,500. Over a year, that's $60,000 versus $114,000. The same work, the same audience, the same content. A $54,000 difference based solely on which platform you chose to stream on. Twitch was not offering infrastructure. At those margins, Twitch was extracting rent. In January 2023, Felix Lengyel, known as XQC, one of the most watched streamers on Earth with over 11 million Twitch followers, signed an exclusive deal with Kick, in the reported value, $70 million over 2 years. Then Amaranth, one of Twitch's most controversial and highest-earning creators, announced Kick as a primary platform. Then Trainwrecks TV, then a cascade of smaller but significant creators who didn't get $70 million checks, but did the math on the revenue split and quietly moved their streaming schedules. The migration was happening, and Twitch's response was a masterclass in how not to manage a crisis. March 7th, 2023, Dan Clancy, who had taken over as Twitch CEO, announced new changes to the partner program. This time, the plan was to reduce the revenue split for creators in countries outside the United States, citing regional infrastructure and bandwidth costs as justification. The specific numbers varied by region, but the direction was consistent. Creators in non-US markets, creators in Brazil, in Germany, in France, and Australia, would be earning less per subscription going forward. The backlash was not merely loud, it was coordinated, international, and immediate. Within 48 hours, Clancy reversed the policy entirely. A full public reversal, a second 180-degree turn on creator economics in less than a year, 2 policy reversals in 12 months. Think about what that signals to a creator who is trying to build a business, not a hobby, a business, with expenses, with employees, with financial planning that requires knowing what your revenue will look like in 6 months. Twitch's management was governing by Twitter reaction, announcing policies, measuring the backlash, reversing course. There was no long-term strategy visible to the people who depended on the platform. There was only reaction, and reaction is not leadership. It is the absence of it. October 6th, 2023 was the day Twitch announced it was shutting down operations in South Korea. South Korea, one of the most internet-connected nations on Earth, home to some of the most devoted gaming audiences anywhere. The country that essentially invented professional esports as a legitimate competitive industry. The country where StarCraft tournaments were broadcast on national television in the early 2000s, drawing audiences that dwarfed Western esports events. Twitch was leaving South Korea because, Clancy said, the network fees charged by South Korean internet service providers under local net neutrality regulations made operating in the market not profitable. The cost, by some estimates, was approximately $30 million per year in additional network fees, for a platform valued at $8 billion, for a company owned by Amazon, which generates over $500 billion in annual revenue. $30 million was too expensive. A gaming platform decided that one of the world's premier gaming markets was too expensive to serve, and rather than absorb the cost, lobby for regulatory change, or restructure its South Korean business model, it left. In 2 months, Korean streamers, creators who had built their entire professional livelihoods on Twitch, were given 60 days to find a new platform or lose their audiences. The platform they had trusted, the platform they had made popular in their market, the platform that had benefited from their content, their communities, their work. 60 days. That the K-shaped creator economy problem had fully arrived by late 2023. That's what happens when a platform's economics become so skewed that the people at the very top survive, while everyone beneath them gets compressed into a choice between grinding for diminishing returns or leaving. The top 1% of Twitch creators, the ones with millions of followers, the ones with $70 million, kick offers waiting in their inbox, were fine. They had leverage. They had options. They had the negotiating power to extract better terms from any platform they chose. But the mid-tier, the 30,000 to 50,000 partners making $40,000 to $100,000 per year, the creators who had turned down traditional careers to stream full-time, who had made the bet that Twitch was stable enough to build a life on, they were getting hit from every direction simultaneously. Revenue splits that hadn't improved, ad rates that had collapsed as the digital advertising market contracted, DMCA, strikes that had deleted their content archives, a South Korea exit that showed the platform would leave markets and creators behind when it became inconvenient. Music. And when the mid-tier leaves, the ecosystem begins to die. Twitch's top streamers didn't exist in isolation. They existed at the top of a pyramid that was built by thousands of smaller creators who drove discovery, who created the culture, who provided the ambient community that made Twitch feel like a place rather than just a service. Music removed the middle, and the pyramid collapses from the bottom up. The The top looks fine until it isn't. YouTube had been watching all of this, and YouTube was moving. Cyan YouTube Gaming had launched in 2015 as a direct Twitch competitor and initially failed to make a dent. But by 2022 and 2023, YouTube had done something smarter than building a separate gaming platform. It had integrated live streaming directly into its main product, into the algorithm, into the discovery engine. This is the thing Twitch could never solve. If you streamed on Twitch and you were not already famous, you were invisible. The platform's discovery mechanism was broken in a fundamental way. New viewers looking for something to watch were pushed toward the biggest channels, the ones already famous. Music, which meant new streamers, had almost no organic path to growth. You had to build your audience off-platform, on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube, and then funnel them back to Twitch. Though you were using other platforms to grow an audience for a platform that wasn't helping you grow. YouTube didn't have this problem. YouTube's algorithm was the most sophisticated content recommendation engine ever built. If you streamed on YouTube and your content was good, the algorithm would find you an audience. From scratch, from 0 followers. The next generation of creators, the ones who were 18, 19, 20 years old in 2022 and 2023, and just starting to think about building a streaming career, looked at both options. Build on Twitch, where discovery is broken and the revenue split is 50-50, or build on YouTube, where the algorithm works and the split is 55 to 45, with upside on premium. The choice wasn't difficult. January 9th, 2024. Twitch announces it is laying off 500 employees, approximately 35% of its total workforce. So Dan Clancy posted a letter to the Twitch community explaining that the platform's cost structure was simply too large for its current scale. Current scale. Let that phrase do its work. They weren't talking about future ambitions or strategic pivots. They were acknowledging that the platform had shrunk to the point where 35% of the team was no longer affordable. The numbers behind the layoffs told the full story. Daily active users had declined by nearly 30% from the pandemic peak of 2021. Hours watched on Twitch had dropped for 3 consecutive years. The advertising market that was supposed to fund Twitch's growth had contracted sharply across all digital platforms in 2022 and 2023. And the creators who drove the most traffic were either gone to Kick or splitting their time across multiple platforms, diluting the exclusive Twitch viewership numbers that advertisers paid premiums to reach. The compounding effect was brutal. Fewer exclusive creators meant fewer exclusive viewers. Fewer exclusive viewers meant lower advertising rates. Lower advertising rates meant less revenue to invest in the platform. Less platform investment meant fewer tools and worse conditions for creators, which drove more creators to leave, which drove more viewers away. Music. This is what a platform death spiral looks like in slow motion, not a dramatic collapse. A grinding, quarterly, methodical unwinding of every competitive advantage that once seemed permanent.